Welcome to the Balanced Badass Podcast, the show for multitaskers determined to stay balanced and badass without losing their minds. Every week, we help you manage your overflowing calendar and household, making sure you still have time to breathe, laugh, and savor that much-needed glass of wine at the end of the day. Think of this podcast as your weekly dose of practical advice, humor, and tough love, just like catching up with a friend who really gets it. I'm Tara Kermiet, your personal growth coach, helping you handle how was your day without a meltdown. Now let's get into today's episode. All right, what is up, party people? We are back, and I'm so excited to have Elizabeth join me here on the podcast. She's an HR pro, a speaker, and she's the founder of Cultivate Growth Co. Company, whatever we want to call it. But even more exciting for me is that she's a fellow Hokie. So she's a Virginia Tech grad. If you know me at all, you know I am a diehard Hokie. So we've already been bonding over all of that and talking about people we know and mutual acquaintances. So I'm excited for today's conversation, even if y'all aren't. So that's all I have to say about that. But in her day job, so Elizabeth works with early career professionals. So she's really got a front row seat to what's really going on with the next generation of workers. And, you know, we've heard about these things, right? The big expectations, obviously the burnout, that's what we talk about here. And then just all that pressure to really have it all figured out right away, which is just unrealistic because I'm 41 and don't have it figured out either. So what she teaches does apply to any stage. So even if you aren't an early career professional, chances are you work with one, but you're also probably listening to this podcast because you're in that season of reevaluating what you want out of work, out of life. So we're just going to jump right into it. Welcome to the Balanced Badass Podcast, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Tara / fellow Hokie.
Fellow Hokie. I'm loving it. All right. So we usually start every episode with an icebreaker. And so I'm wanting to know, what's something that you're loving in your life right now?
I love this question because we need to start like all conversations with this. I think it's just such a good one.
That's right.
I'm going to go with a very oddball one, or maybe it just feels really random. I've been doing a lot of work on myself over the last year and getting more comfortable with stillness because I've been such a doer. And last winter, I really came into the whole, there are YouTube videos of just like ambiance music that is jazz, like coffee shop vibes. And the fall ones are especially aesthetically pleasing. And so whether it's like a fire or like literally a coffee shop or a cute cabin in the woods with like rain in the background, just having that in the background of me doing stuff around my house or sitting and having some quiet time reading, whatever, I just love it. It just feels like it makes life better. So that feels like a really random one, but I just love that.
Oh, I love that so much. And I think that such a great recognition too of how much just like our lives and chaos can really influence us, just being a part of our regular routine, that you need to take that break and be quiet all the time. So I love that. I do like those, like the fire crackling or whatever. We actually have like a fireplace now in our house, but it's, I live in North Carolina. So most of the time we don't need it. The fireplace, so I will throw on the fake fireplace just to get the ambiance without the heat. So yeah, I totally get that. I am one that I love to sit in silence. My husband cannot handle quiet. He needs just noise going on. I could sit in silence probably for a very long time and be okay. So
old me could not do that. New me is working on it. So I appreciate that in you because that is a skill that people need.
It is. It's certainly good. Although my brain can definitely get the best of me during that time too. So yeah. All right. Well, let's jump into it. So I do want to start with this early career professional perspective. So knowing that you've spent a lot of time around folks that are just starting their careers,
just from your perspective, like what are you seeing that concerns you most about the way that young professionals are showing up in the working world and how maybe they're transitioning into it?
Yeah, and I could talk for 13 years about this one question, so I'm going to try to be as succinct as I can. I also want to give a disclaimer. I come from an agriculture background, and so my sampling of experience really comes from that industry and different sectors within it. So I just want to give that disclaimer. I work within really the STEM world, but just within the agriculture lens. So want to give that clarification. A couple observations that I've had, I would say one is pretty normal when it comes to academia versus industry. I think academia has just been known to be a little bit slower in how they teach people things and just getting up to speed, and that's okay, right? They're big monsters of machines to do that, and I say that just because I think that gap is pretty normal. And one of the ways that I'm seeing that play out, just to say that this is still happening, is a lot of schools are saying, students, you can't use AI because you need to learn how to think for yourselves. You need to process and problem solve, which I absolutely agree with wholeheartedly. However, when they get to industry, my company uses Copilot all the time, right? And we're using AI in different ways. And so I think a lot of the phrases of AI is not going to take your job, but someone knows how to use it will. That's absolutely reality. And so when they get to us, I don't want them to be scared of using it, right? But I do also, I know that it's a tough balance with how do we teach people to think for themselves and not rely on this. So that is a challenge that I'm seeing. I don't necessarily have a solution to it. I just, again, I want to recognize that the academia and industry gap is normally there. So that's just kind of what I'll start with. The other thing, you touched on this in the intro, I think it's really fascinating that we're asking students, when I say students, think middle school, high school, to make decisions on what they want to do for the rest of their lives without the one, knowledge of who they are and what's important to them, and then two, without the experience. And I do recognize that those programs are incredible and that they give them experience at a young age, but I'm thinking about someone basically declaring the equivalent of a major in high school. And the strength to that, again, is the exposure and feeling confident in that path. The negative to that is feeling like your identity is carved in middle school or high school and that you have to commit to that for the rest of your life. I think we already have a hard time in HR and maybe some other people, maybe just in like their personal lives, um, experience this. But sometimes it's really hard to convince somebody that you don't have to go into a job that was based on your major. And
Hmm.
really, what I care about is really how you show up and the skills that you can transfer into what you're applying to. And so I think what's really fascinating is that again, we're putting so much emphasis on the what, and I think we really need to put an emphasis on the how. And I this is something I've been thinking a lot about. I think I'll get to this in a second or a little bit deeper in this, but so much of what we think about when it comes to careers is about the what. It's not about who we are and it's not about how we do it. But I really want to challenge people to reframe that and think about the who you are and how you're doing things is more important, which really brings me to my last thought of something that is standing out to me, and I spend so much time thinking about this. So thank you for giving me the ability to share it. But I would say the biggest thing that I'm seeing right now of people entering into the workforce is what I'm calling an expectations gap. So when I was in college, and maybe when you were in college, Tara, I felt like industry was hard to understand. We didn't know what jobs existed. It felt like it was this big beast that we didn't really understand what that meant. And now we have more information than what we know to do with. And the really interesting part of that is all of these people in high school, college, whatever, they have access to what jobs exist. They have access to the salaries. They understand that work life balance, especially post COVID, the expectations are different. And I think a lot of these young people are thinking, okay, I know what's out there and I know like I'm going to advocate for myself and I know what I deserve, which is amazing. However, in your early career, so much of that is about building credibility and building skills. Again, it's not about the what you do, it's about how you do it and who you are and showing that. And so I think what I'm seeing is a lot of people want the salary or the flexible schedule in their first job. And they're like, "Oh, well, I can get a new job if this is toxic or this doesn't work out." Or, they just seem to have pretty firm boundaries, which again, boundaries are healthy. I'm a recovering people pleaser. I know that that's important. But I also want to level set the expectation that when you start your career, that is way different than you building the credibility, you having the experience, and the time management skills, right? To know how to adjust your schedule. So I'm not talking about everybody here. Of course, this is a generalization, but I would say we as a society need to be really intentional about meeting them where they're at when it comes to their preferences and their desires and their needs in the working world. And they also need to meet industry where they're at of saying, hey, maybe I haven't built enough credibility or experience to ask for unlimited vacation days or to leave work at 3 p.m. or whatever it is. So I call it the expectations gap, but that's one thing I'm noticing a lot of, and something I'm really passionate about, trying to be clear about what industry means, but also clear about, hey, I've been in my career for this long and I've worked to get to this point. It wasn't like I just started with that. And I never want to come across as a girl like this is how it's always been. But there is some reality to, we have to see what you're made of, and we have to see good work before we really trust you to have that flexibility. So I will end my rant there, but there's definitely a lot more where that came from.
Yeah. I appreciate what you said first about AI, because AI wasn't even that big when I was working in higher ed just a few years ago. And obviously it's blown up a lot. And I mean, it existed, but to the layperson like myself, we didn't really know much about it, right? But I see like my former colleagues that I've worked with that are still working in the industry, that it's becoming such a conversation. And there is that sense of fear, like especially folks that are working as faculty members, like trying to navigate how do you teach appropriate usage of it, but also hold those boundaries and hold people accountable and all that. And that, it does make me wonder, like, and I don't know, because I'm out of that field, but like, what are we teaching students, especially, I talk about college because that's just where my experience is, but like on discernment on how to use it appropriately and like how to be strategic about it. And, to your point of like how to know how to use it so that it doesn't take your job, or the person that knows how to use it better doesn't take your job. Because I think if we're not talking about it in that lens, we're putting students at a disadvantage for when they do enter the workforce. But what I really want to touch on is what you were talking about, as far as like, you have to know who you are. And when you're young, I mean, your brain is literally not fully developed enough to even know that and to process that. And I talk a lot about like values and understanding like who you are and what you want. And I'm even seeing, just not with young professionals, but with mid-career or even advanced career folks that are kind of at this crossroads of like, what do I value? What's important? Because we have grown up with like what the shoulds, I call it, quit shoulding ourselves and all that kind of stuff. And when you talk about this expectation gap, I see such a close connection with that, because especially when you think about like the boundaries and the things that you're advocating for, if you don't know what's important to you professionally, if you don't know the value that you're bringing to an organization, you're still figuring all that out when you're, 5-ish years into your career. How can you determine the right boundaries to advocate for, Like, I just keep thinking about if I would have, and what's important to me now was not important to me when I was younger in my career. So like also thinking about that and how that could change and ebb and flow. And to your point too, there's also this opportunity, like you have to consider like, what kind of influence do you actually have? What kind of leverage do you have when you're first starting compared to a couple of years in, when you have really established that rapport, established the evidence value that you're providing the organization. So, Elizabeth, I do love that you really teach people about, listening to their internal compass and kind of knowing who you are and what you bring. And for someone that either has never really done that before, or especially those folks that are maybe following what they think they should do, where do you even tell them to start with this?
Well, I first want to give validation to, if you like, if you're listening to this and you are completely overwhelmed at like internal compass or what's important to me, know that I've been there, and I think it's a very normal thing, especially when you're going through school. Even if you don't go to college, a lot of the time you're basing your, not just identity, but I would say your worth on what other people think of you. Like if you think about grades, for example, how you do on a grade, that doesn't really come from you. I mean, you work for it, right? But a teacher is giving that to you, a professor is giving that to you, and whether or not somebody gives you a job, right? Like that's kind of how you're measuring your worth. And so it's very normal to be feeling lost. And sometimes if you're close with your family or friend or community in some regard, it's really easy just to be thinking, well, this person told me that I would be good at this, or this person does this job and I want to be just like them. It is so normal to have all of those experiences. So I just want to say that out loud, because there's nothing wrong with you if that is the case. And I had a combination of literally everything that I just said. I grew up on a dairy farm, and work was life and life was work. So identity in work was a very big problem in my life until recently. And then in addition to that, I really respected a lot of people around me, my parents, I respected our community. And so I was like, oh, I want to be just like them. And it was really, really hard. So this comes from a place of me doing this myself and saying that there's no magical answer to doing this perfectly, but I want to give some insight as to what I think is a really good starter level to get into it. And the first thing is just create, I would say an hour is a great time, but just start with some reflection and start with some prompts. Make it comfortable for you. So whether that's the music we were talking about earlier, putting that on and getting a cup of coffee or something, and just giving yourself like an hour time, like put a timer and put your phone on do not disturb and just focus on the writing, but focus for 30 minutes, an hour, and answer some questions. I have a couple of questions I'll share now that I think are relevant. One group being more relevant to career, and then more being about really what's important to you for the rest of your life. And so I would say get comfortable, 30 minutes to an hour once, and get started with these prompts. So some of the career questions would be, think about things that you really do like when it comes to work and things that energize you. That could be literally the jobs that you've had, even if they were part-time or an internship, or that could be activities that you do at work, like your current job. Go through like, I really enjoy my weekly meetings with this group of people. I really enjoy getting to network with these people, or whatever it looks like. That is really a helpful way of just like, okay, what do you like? Do the same thing for things that you don't like and things that don't energize you. I'll be the first to admit, expense reports, my least favorite thing, because I know that it's an attention to detail, and the detail in math is not my strong suit. So I can tell you that. I can also tell you that rejecting people from jobs, one of my least favorite things, takes away my energy, but it's a part of my job that I can't get rid of, right? Like if you're a recruiter, you have to tell people no. So it's helpful just to know those things so that I can manage my energy effectively. And after you do that, think about how can you incorporate a little bit more of what energizes you into your week. Even if it's like, well, I really like talking to people. I'm going to do a lap around the office and say hi, or I'm going to try to meet with a new person. So that's like the starter level for career. I would also spend some time during that same period to think about, again, the who and the how. We've talked about this. Like, who do I want to be? How do I want to be known? And here are some of the questions that I think are helpful for that. Where do I want to be at the end of my life? Like, you can think about that very literally. You can think about it in terms of career, family, whatever. But what type of person do I want to be, and what do I hope that I'll be proud of? So maybe that's your family. Maybe that's the fact that you took risks in your career. Maybe that's the fact that you stood up for something that you believed in, right? Those are some things to think about at the end of your life. What do you hope that you are proud of? And then also think about what other impact that you want to have on other people. How do you want to make other people's lives better? I mean, some people, if you're in survival mode, you might not be thinking about that, but honestly, sometimes bringing you up to that level of like, okay, I can make other people's lives better. Right now, I feel like I'm struggling, but there are ways that I can make other people's lives better. So thinking about how you can impact people. And then the last question that I think is really a fun one, because we don't usually stop and think about it, is what is a cause or a mission that I care really deeply about that I want to learn more about? And that could be literally working at an animal shelter, or that could be you're really passionate about a disease that's been in your family that you want to just support a little bit more, learn more about. Or it could be like, well, I really like scuba diving, so I want to I want to learn more about that and how I might be able to do it, right? So I think that's a really comprehensive list. So just kind of taking an inventory of what's going on now in terms of, current position, but also like what are you aiming for? And one of the best pieces of career advice I ever got was think about the impact that you want to have on the world at the end of your career and what are the steps that will help you get there. So I think that that's a really clear roadmap of at least giving you an idea of what is the end goal. Because if you don't have an end goal, then you're not going to be able to get there. So I would say that part reflection is really important. And then incorporate this like into your month. Like do an audit of the things that you've done that you really energize you. Do an audit of the things that you're like, oh, that really was not my favorite thing to do. Again, like expense reports, or it was, you really had to work late one night and you were really tired the next day and that was not ideal for you, or whatever it is. But I think holding yourself accountable to taking, whether it's weekly, monthly, um, anything, I mean, you could even do it daily if you wanted to, of how do I feel about the things in my life? Um, it's so easy just to go through life without even thinking about how you feel about it. And so the really important thing here is to think about, what do you want? Take the voices out of your head, take the voices out from your ears, from all the people around you, and think about, if I had to make a decision without anybody else's input, these are the things that I would do. And then think about, and then of course, like record how those things are making you feel so you know how to adjust accordingly. That's really step one. And then step two, I don't think that has to happen right away, is I love Dr. John Deloney. I don't know, Tara, if you're a fan of him. I figured that you would be based on this, but I absolutely love how he describes mindfulness is literally the space between something that happens to you and what you decide to do next. And I think when you're a people pleaser like me, or the should camp that you were talking about, or if you are just used to going through the motions because you don't know any different, it is so easy for you just to keep going, to never think about the impacts on you, your body, your mind, your spirit, right? And so what we talked about earlier, I really have tried to incorporate 5 to 10 minutes of not doing anything every day so that I can be like, okay, how do I actually feel in my body? And also, wow, I can't turn my mind off today. Like I need to physically give myself a couple of minutes of mindfulness meditation. Or, hey, I'm feeling really stressed. Like I'm going to have a dance party and get this energy out of my system, whatever. But I think it's so easy just to say yes to things and to keep doing things and just not think about it. And so once you turn off the automatic obligation to doing things, or the kind of the automatic just system that you have, it really will help you be able to figure out, actually, I don't really like doing that. I don't know why I said yes to that. Or I don't, I've never thought about it that way. I didn't enjoy that. Or, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that I did that. That doesn't happen unless you create the space for it. So I think 5 to 10 minutes a day is really helpful. I incorporate mindfulness meditation just to clear my mind. That helps me feel better. But I would say that margin and that space in your life is a game changer.
Yeah. And what you said too about the margin is important, but building it into the routine, I think, is so important, because as you're starting to document these things and going through these questions pretty regularly, as someone who does this as well and reflects quite often, you start to see trends and you start to see patterns. Like I have noticed, like where my energy drains may coincide with certain life experiences going on, even like the seasons
Yeah.
and all that too. And that's important to recognize, not just for what you're looking for in a job, but also how you approach your work. Because, I talk about, you mentioned earlier, like time management kind of stuff. A lot of what we need to do is less time management and more energy management, and knowing
amen.
where you can get the most return on investment with your energy.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what those things are, then that's problematic.
Yeah.
I think to even take what you were talking about a step further is to even think about, not only are you tracking like what energizes me, what tasks am I enjoying, blah, 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 what drains me, opposite of that, right? But also then taking it a step further and thinking, why? Like, why do I enjoy this? And this is where I try to connect with strengths, because I think if you can do more where you're living in your strengths and capitalizing on those and really putting those to good use through the work that you do, yes, you're still going to have tough times. We're all going to struggle. Work is work. It's not going to be fun all the time. It's not sunshine and rainbows, but you will feel like you're doing something purposeful. And that's why I think where the difference between this like burnout experience is getting further and further disconnected from that purpose or like your why behind things too. So I do really appreciate that. And like you gave really good tangible things that folks can think about. I also, just to add to that, if folks are looking for additional things, one of my favorite activities is actually like a branded activity, but is to get folks to ask, let's say 5 people that have known them from different parts of their lives. So it could be somebody that knew you when you were in high school, college, whatever, folks that work with you, family members, just friends, whatever. And ask them for one story of when you were at your best.
Ooh.
And then look for themes in those stories. Like what strengths came out? What were you doing? Even think about like what did you remember from that experience? It's such a great insight, because sometimes, this is something I always say, is like you can't read a book that's sitting flat on your face.
Yeah.
And so we can't sometimes see within ourselves what we're good at, what we're talented at, especially if you're in a tough time. Like, I mean, burnout, the science shows, like the data and research shows, it takes away your confidence.
Yep.
And so sometimes you need that outside perspective to give you a different lens. So that's a great way too to add to and supplement and see where might there be some ties across like where you're getting energy or drained versus like when people see you at your best too.
100%. And I think after the why question too, it's almost one thing I just want to say out loud is I had to work with a coach to figure out what my core values were.
Mm-hmm.
And once I started realizing things that I really enjoyed and I felt burnt out in a previous role, I worked with a coach to be like, okay, I don't know where I'm at. Like, I know these things. I know generally things that I don't like, things that I do like, but I'm starting from ground zero. So help me figure that out. And so I think I say that because determining your core values is a part of this, but it's not where you're going to start. Like, you have to notice the small stuff, especially if you're in a burnout stage, to get to that point. So I just say that of it's a staircase. You're not going to start with the biggest thing first.
Yeah. Yeah. Pick the small wins.
Yep.
That way you can. Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about, for folks that may be listening that are managing people, that are people managers, because I know this is another piece of what you talk about, of like putting the people first in their work and understanding that. And that's something that, as someone who has worked for previously a claimed people first organization, that values were not aligned with that. So it's something that's very important to me, to put people at the center of our work. So if you had to pinpoint maybe like the biggest blind spot that leaders have when it comes to really knowing their people, what would it be? And like, how do we as managers get to know our people better?
This is such a loaded question. I'm excited to give my take on it, but I feel like I'm only going to give like 1/100th of the piece of the pie. Sure. But I will say something that I've noticed is I feel like assumptions are very common when it comes to leaders that I have worked with and seen, in the sense of assuming that the people on this team have the same level of loyalty to the cause or to the organization that they have, or the CEO has, or the VP has, or whatever. And that everyone feels confidently about the change because you feel confidently about the change, right? And you have known about it for months, but they just heard about it 2 years ago, or excuse me, 2 days ago, right? You heard about it 2 years ago. Or people, so I guess I would say, trying to put different words on this, is it's failing to think about things from the team's context. And one of the other ways I see this come up is leaders thinking like, well, I'm transparent, I leave my door open, I'll tell you anything that you want to hear. Leaders, you have to initiate that. You can't just like do the passive thing waiting for them to come to you. Like, you have to show, number one, that you care, that you want them to get you to know you personally, if that's what you'd like to do, that they can respect you and trust you. You can't just sit back and wait for that to happen, because leaders are hard to approach. I don't care if you're the nicest person in the whole world. Like, you having a title behind you and having authority behind you within an organization makes you harder to approach, especially when maybe that it's a pretty hierarchical organization, right? So I think that's really important. And I also think that one of the things I've noticed is some leaders have a really good perspective of like the whole picture. Your teams typically are so in the weeds on something that when you make a change, like, it would be so empowering for someone to say, I know that this makes your process a lot harder. It's going to take you a lot more time. It's a really easy thing to do, but I feel like a lot of people don't recognize it, because I feel like a lot of the time people don't know how much these people are doing, right? So maybe it's just like not understanding the workload, or maybe it's just not willingness to say that one sentence of like, I know that this is going to make your life harder. I think they try so hard all the time, as they should, to be positive and to lead with a positive attitude. But sometimes, especially when things are harder, it's a big change. You have to admit the things that are different for them than different from you. And so, especially in a hybrid environment, like, you have to really go out of your way to create spaces for people to know who you are and for you to know them, and to feel like it's a meaningful exchange, not just like a call, right? So I would say just generally not putting yourself in the team's shoes. It's not their fault, right? Because they obviously have a different perspective. They're at a different level for a reason. However, there would be so much value in getting down to their level and saying like, I want to be in the weeds with you just to understand this and the impacts for you, or understand that this is hard. So that's one thing. There's probably a zillion answers to that question, but that's what I've noticed.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, the I've heard a lot in the past when I was supervising folks or whatever, of like, the leadership doesn't know what I do. Like, and the expectation that they should know, which they should know to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Are they going to know the nitty-gritty of what every day looks like for you? Probably not, unless you share that with them. It has to be a mutual, psychologically safe environment to be able to do so. But what I think is important too, and something that I see missing a lot, is including the people in the process. So as change is occurring, even if you can't change the change, like, because a lot of times it's top down, right? We don't, especially middle managers, like, you are pretty much just the deliverer, right?
Yeah.
You're the shock absorber and the deliverer all at the same time. But there are ways to bring them in of, okay, let's talk about how this is going to impact you and your role, and strategize on how we can approach it together.
Mm-hmm.
We may not be able to change what's happening, but we can change our response to it and like what that means for you. And I do think that that's missing a lot, because there is this assumption of like, well, my door's open and nobody came to me about complaining or like had any concerns. I'm like, just because I didn't tell you does not mean that the concerns weren't there.
Even if they offered, even if you were like, well, come to me if you have any problems, that doesn't mean they're going to come to you.
Right. And there's something to be said for reaching out individually to each person and just be like, hey, I just want to pulse check real quick, see how things are going. Any concerns on your end, especially with your role, like whatever you're talking about, having that one-on-one connection too. Because also, if you bring it up in meetings, I see this a lot too with management, or you'll have a staff meeting, you'll present something. Anybody have any questions? You see the same 3 hands raise, or nobody says anything. They're not comfortable in that environment, or they are processors, so it takes them some time to really think through whatever it might be. You can't just do one and done and offer that up as an opportunity and a blanket opportunity for everybody.
Yep.
You need to give different options for different folks to connect. And that comes from knowing your people, because you need to know how they process information, how they receive information, how they like to share insights, like how they think, how they work, all that kind of stuff. I'm genuinely taking the time to get to know your people.
Yep. And I would say that I think sometimes it's assumed that your manager or a leader is just going to do that for you. And it's not the leader's fault. Sometimes they're just not thinking about it. They don't have the capacity, the time, the season, whatever. So I'm just a really big believer in like co-creating the expectation that is what's happening, which is exactly what you're saying. I'm a big believer that it's not just up to the leaders to make this stuff happen. It's up to the teams to make this happen, and vice versa. And sometimes I just, to say what I said earlier differently, I just wish that leaders would know that just the bare minimum isn't enough in some cases. And like you said, getting to know your people and individually is really important part of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I always emphasize that too when I'm teaching about like providing feedback and all that kind of stuff, because feedback hits differently for different people. And it really does take that time to know those individuals, to know how to best deliver that feedback to get the result that you're looking for as a leader. Because that's at the end of the day, the feedback is to steer them and coach them in the right direction for the results that you're looking for and for them to be successful. But if you're not delivering it in a manner that is going to be received and absorbed by that individual, then you're wasting everybody's time, essentially. And you're doing them a disservice. That's another thing that I always think about too. Like when I was supervising folks, like I really wanted to provide an opportunity where they have the foundation to be successful. I'm not doing anything to hinder their success. What they choose to do with that opportunity is out of my hands, but I have to control what I can control. And that's the environment, the foundation, the support that they receive.
Amen. I'm super passionate about feedback. Yeah. So I'm with you.
Management is fun. But I think it's also important. I'm really glad you kind of talked about this too, because we get to this like pointing fingers phase, right? Like you've got the managers and leadership pointing down to their direct reports being like, they're not doing this. And then you have the direct reports pointing up saying, well, my manager is not doing this. And we all have some responsibility in the relationship. It is to your point, like it's a partnership, it's co-created. And just like any relationship where you have to put effort into it, this is one of those relationships.
Agreed. If you want it to be good, you have to work at it. That's just how it goes.
Yeah. Well, I know we are getting to time, so I want to ask you my last question. So this podcast is all about balanced living with badass results. And so I love to ask every guest on the podcast, how do you define being a balanced badass in your own life?
This is going to sound redundant of what I've said, but it just means that I really believe it. Knowing who you are and what's important to you, pursuing that in a way that you are proud of, and making an impact on the people around you all at the same time. So for me, that is taking time to really know what is in my heart, how my body is feeling, like, because that tells me a lot about what's going on, making sure my decisions align with that and moving in a direction acting in a way that I'm like, this is of integrity. This is a way that I will be proud of in the future, but also impacting people around me. So it's a metric that I think everyone should hold themselves to that standard. Like that's the goal, right? To know yourself and want to be the best version of yourself while making an impact on other people. I'm not perfect at it, but it is something that is a really good barometer. And I love the name of the podcast. I love what you're going after. I think it's a great way to think about this is the goal. It's not a career ladder. It is about what does balance and success look like for each person.
Yeah. I love what you said about being proud of. I think that that's something we lose sight of the more in it we get sometimes. And so just having that be your temperature gauge, your checkpoint on a regular basis, even building that in to the reflections that you brought up earlier, asking that question of like, what was I proud of this week? What was I not? Like,
Yeah.
am I living more in alignment with what I say is important to me? I think that that's a good way to end the episode. So thank you for that.
You got it.
This was definitely such a good conversation. We could probably do this for a much longer time. But for anyone who wants to keep learning from you, or I know you're a speaker, so if they want to bring you in to speak, where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, I'm probably most active on LinkedIn. So you can find me Elizabeth Galbreath on LinkedIn. And then my website is elizabethgalbreath.com. So my last name is Galbreath. So elizabethgalbreath.com. And you can find information about speaking. I've got a blog there where I talk about some of the stuff we discussed today. And then would love to work with events or people that are trying to help people, again, find the inner compass, self-awareness, confident careers, and building relationships are really the focus of what I do. So would be happy to connect with anybody.
Awesome. And I'll be sure to link everything in the show notes too. But yeah, thanks so much for being here today.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for having me. And thank you for, again, creating the conversation about this as someone that's gone through burnout myself in multiple roles. What you do is so important because people feel so overwhelmed when they're in that season. So you giving just bite-sized pieces of advice on how to help them get out of it is probably changing people's lives, whether or not you realize it. But thank you for the light that you give to the world through that.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Oh, that just made my heart warm. So for anyone listening, I just want to say, I think the biggest takeaway, at least for me here, is that a lot of this clarity that comes with choosing your career, finding the right avenue for you, it doesn't just happen. You really have to make space for it. And so whether you're early in your career or you've been at it for 20, 30 years, it's never too late to just take a pause, check in with yourself, and do a little realignment. Sometimes we all need that, especially at different seasons of our life. So as we wrap up, I hope that you'll share this episode, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks for hanging out with me on the Balanced Badass podcast. I hope today's episode brought you a little more balance and a lot more badass in your day. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with a friend, and leave a review. Your support helps more multitaskers like you find the show, and I'd really appreciate it. Until next time, take care of yourself and make good choices, friend. I'll catch you next week.